Welcome to the Lifestyle First podcast, discussing lifestyle medicine and making self-care as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1 question, 2 research reviews, and 3 actionable health tips, all centered around the Lifestyle First method, your blueprint for the 10 key routes of optimal health and happiness. And now your host, lifestyle medicine physician and coach, Dr. Alka Patel.
Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 2. Today we're continuing to take a deep dive with my co-authors into the book, A Prescription for Healthy Living. And the theme in the Lifestyle First method we're exploring today is identity. Now, a woman's identity is often shaped by milestones in her life, such as pregnancy and menopause. And today we're exploring the question, how can lifestyle modifications at different life stages enhance a woman's health and her identity? 2 references to support today's discussion are a 2009 research paper by Jolanda Boxmeer and her team looking at folic acid and pregnancy, and a 2014 research paper by Brianna Ruddick and her team looking at vitamin D and pregnancy. So let me welcome to the show today Dr. Alexandra Kermack. Dr. Kermack, she is a National Institute of Health Research clinical lecturer from the University of Southampton, and she specialises in obstetrics and gynaecology, and so her practice is very much embedded in helping to improve the health of women through their life course. She has done a PhD which interestingly examined the effect of omega-3 and vitamin D on embryos, looking at how it changed those rapidly dividing cells in those first few days of life. And she is absolutely passionate about utilising diet and exercise and lifestyle advice to improve the well-being of her patients through all stages, of course, in conjunction with conventional medicine as well. And Dr. Kermack, she has authored the chapter, Lifestyle Factors and Women's Health, in the book, A Prescription for Healthy Living. So, Alexandra, welcome. Really great to have you here today. We're exploring identity today, and we're looking at how lifestyle modifications at different life stages enhance a woman's health and her identity. And I guess, as women, we do go through so many physiological life stages, don't we? And for you, that you're working very, very closely with women. So I guess my first question to you would be, what have you noticed about our identity as women and its connection to all those physiological and very natural changes that we go through in our life, whether it's an onset of periods in our teens or possible conception, motherhood for some women, and then menopause too later on? Do you think that our physiology affects our identity?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So much of what happens to us physically and changes in hormones, and if we're trying to get pregnant or whether we're going through the menopause, so much of that impacts on who we are and gives us part of our identity as a girl, as a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother. And actually, those rapid changes in the hormones that often occur at certain points, so when you start your periods at menarche, or when you go through the menopause, or when you become pregnant, they impact on so much of your life. So they impact on your mood, they impact on the quality of your sleep, they impact on what you fancy to eat, and that in turn then impacts on everything around you, doesn't it? It impacts on your relationships and on how you interact with the world, and so absolutely that gives you one part of your identity, and it's something that we need to take into account when we're talking to these women and when we're treating them. And actually, when something goes wrong in that, so when somebody can't conceive, or when somebody goes through an early menopause, actually the effects on their identity can be absolutely huge. There's been one study that said that the psychological impacts of subfertility on a woman are similar to a cancer diagnosis. I mean, that's just massive, isn't it? So absolutely, everything we go through impacts on our identity, and I just think it's really important that we bear that in mind.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something really important there, haven't you? Is it's being able to express that identity, and particularly in that world of fertility, which I know is your sort of area of expertise. It's not an easy space to really vocalize the impact on you, the person. It becomes about process, doesn't it? You're going through so many processes when you're trying to conceive and receiving help to do that, that actually you don't allow yourself to be part of that journey as you, the person. So yeah, I think that's so true what you've just said. So fertility is an area of expertise for you, isn't it? What have you noticed? Have you noticed that fertility concerns are becoming an increasing issue for couples? I mean, I'm certainly getting maybe a lot more consultations than I used to. I don't know. Is it about awareness, or actually are the issues increasing? What's your experience been?
So I think it's probably a multifactorial. I think it's probably both those things. I think people are talking about it much more now, which is fantastic, because, you know, back when our mums became mums, people didn't talk about it. And so actually, if you were struggling to conceive then you just became a woman who didn't have a child, and that was obviously awful, but you had to deal with your own grief by yourself. And now we've come so far in the medical world, in helping people conceive, that actually it's a much more talked about area, which is great. But it is really common. I mean, it's somewhere between 1 in 6 and 1 in 10 couples. So, you know, we all know people. They're going to be our friends. They're going to be in our communities. And actually, we do need to make sure that we're talking to them to allow them to either go down a path where they are seeking medical assistance to conceive, or just to let them grieve the fact that they perhaps won't become a mum. So I do think that's really important, and again all links in with their identity, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, completely. So thinking then about lifestyle, you know, we do, as you say, we sort of do medicalize fertility quite rapidly, don't we? I know we give a window, don't we? We say, look, you know, it's very natural for conception to take up to 12 months of having unprotected sex, and after that we'll start the cycle of finding out what else could be going on. So we do at a point in time change what is natural to something that becomes more medicalized. But I really wanted to zone in on lifestyle modifications, because there is so much more evidence, isn't there, about how we can actually enhance our chances of conceiving without needing to medicalize it too early. Of course, there are interventions, and incredible interventions that we have available to us now. But what about before that, or even during that? What are those lifestyle factors that can really help improve those chances of conception?
I mean, I think it's great if people, once they decide that they want to try and conceive, if they can start on that journey of making those changes, and not get to the point where they've been trying for 12 months and then they think, maybe there's something wrong, I need to make some changes. Because actually we know that the healthier the mum, the healthier the baby. And so if we can make those lifestyle changes nice and early, then actually it can have a real impact on their offspring. I've read a really great study that showed that about 3/4 of women trying to conceive have made at least one lifestyle modification. So that's absolutely fantastic. And that really means that women are taking on board that, you know, they can alter the course of their offspring's life before that offspring is even conceived. So, you know, that's just brilliant. The biggest change that people are making is taking daily folic acid, which obviously we would strongly recommend. There's very strong evidence from the Medical Research Council that shows that taking 400 micrograms of folic acid a day decreases your chance of your baby having a neural tube defect. And that's a defect in the baby's brain or spine. So it can be catastrophic in some cases. So there are some subgroups that should take more than that. For instance, if you're on anti-epileptic medicines and things. So it's important that if you have any additional risk factors, that you have a chat with your GP or your specialist before starting on folic acid to make sure you're taking enough. But otherwise it should be 400 micrograms. Now, in addition to preventing neural tube defects, folic acid has been shown to increase the chance of conception in couples undergoing fertility treatment. And they've shown that there's a 3-fold increase in biochemical pregnancy in women undergoing IVF, which again is huge. Now, you could argue that a biochemical pregnancy, what that means is that you have those pregnancy hormones there. It doesn't necessarily mean that it results in a live birth, but actually it increases your chances. You've got over one hurdle, so that's great. So it's really a double bonus. It's a no-brainer. We should absolutely be encouraging women to take folic acid. I mean, I've done an audit which did show that it's actually probably only about 71% of women are, and that's women who are undergoing fertility treatment. So we really, as healthcare professionals and as friends of people that might be undergoing fertility treatments, we just need to get that message out there that folic acid is so important.
You're right, aren't you? I think folic acid is becoming increasingly known about during pregnancy and during those early weeks, but that's so interesting that you're actually saying it supports conception, so actually getting pregnant. So yes, absolutely, the earlier, the moment you as a couple decide or choose to think about even starting a family, that's your go-to to really kind of triple, double up your opportunity. So that's really important. And you're right. I mean, look, there's a lot more to getting pregnant than very simply sperm meeting egg, isn't there? There's psychological factors, nutritional factors. Folic acid is one supplement, but the supplement industry is just exploding at the moment, isn't it? And we know that supplements are no substitute for really good, wholesome eating, but they can certainly have a very, very specific and supportive role. So apart from folic acid, is there research that tells us about any other supplements in relation to conceiving?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a growing body of evidence that says that women who are trying to conceive, and certainly those with a raised BMI, so a raised body mass index, so those who are overweight or obese, should take some vitamin D supplements. And that's partly to supplement the mum, because we know that they become deplete as the pregnancy goes on. It's partly because we know as a nation, we're pretty depleted in vitamin D generally. Unfortunately, if you look at the weather today, you'll understand why. But there is also an effect on fertility. And actually the paper was fascinating. So it was performed in egg donors and their recipients. And it demonstrated that it doesn't actually matter what the status of the donor was. So it doesn't matter what is surrounding that egg, but what matters is the status of the recipient. So the person donating the eggs could have very little vitamin D. As long as the person that's receiving those eggs has good levels of vitamin D, then their chance of conception was hugely higher. So that's really interesting. And that tells us that vitamin D probably plays a part in the receptivity of the lining of the womb, which we don't really fully understand yet, but is an area of research that's growing really rapidly, and will just be really interesting to see how it changes that lining of the womb and why.
Gosh, vitamin D keeps popping up everywhere now, doesn't it? It really has got so many effects and benefits that are seemingly, certainly coming through. I don't think this has become mainstream advice. There's certainly in general practice and GP land, we're not saying take folic acid and vitamin D. We're not really embedding those conversations. Folic acid, absolutely, it's been embedded for a long time, but this is really, really interesting to start also to talk about vitamin D and vitamin D levels and supplementation, which again is easily available, isn't it, from pharmacies in the same way as folic acid is something that you can certainly buy. And as you say, we're not getting it necessarily in our food. We're certainly not getting it enough through the sunshine either. So that's a really good piece of advice. Other vitamins, anything around C, E, others?
So there's less evidence for others. There's been a systematic review that showed that vitamin C and E didn't really increase pregnancy rates in subfertile women. I personally, during my PhD, looked at omega-3 and vitamin D. We did give 10 micrograms of vitamin D to the women and their partners who were undergoing IVF treatment. And what we looked at was whether the quality of their embryos was improved by those supplements. So we gave quite a lot of omega-3. We gave 2 grams a day, which is essentially the equivalent of you eating a portion of salmon a day. So not huge quantities, but equally most people don't eat a portion of salmon a day. So relatively high doses of supplements. And what we did was we looked down the microscope at the embryos and just looked at how those cells were dividing. And what we found was that something called the CC4, which is the 4th cell cycle, which is how quickly that embryo divides from 5 to 9 cells, actually increased in couples that were taking the omega-3. Now, I don't know why that happened, and that's obviously something I want to look into in the future. And what I don't know is whether that is linked to improved pregnancy rates. So that's certainly a study that needs to be done to see whether that improves pregnancy rates and whether that improves live birth. There have been studies that have said that the quickening of the CC4 does improve live birth rates, but what would be really nice is to supplement women with omega-3 and then say more of them got pregnant, because then we can have a definitive answer as to whether omega-3 is important. My gut says it is, but I don't have the evidence yet to back that up.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling that as well. I want to say yes, but we 100% need a lot more information and research behind that before we start to make that become something that we start to advocate a lot more. But what about real food? I mean, is there a fertility diet? So if you had to put together real food that women should be eating to support fertility, what's your research evidence information telling you? What would that look like?
So, I mean, my gut says that it would be healthy food that we all know what we should be eating. I don't think we should be cutting out any big food groups. So, I think there's a lot of faddy diets out there now. So I think we need to be very sensible about what we eat and sort of everything in moderation. A Mediterranean diet, so one high in vegetable oils, fish, vegetables, legumes, low in sort of carbohydrate-rich snacks. That's been positively associated with an improvement in folate levels, vitamin B6 levels, and also a 40% increase in the probability of pregnancy. They were couples undergoing fertility treatments, but it still showed a difference. Now, part of the problem is those women were reporting what they eat. So that does make these studies slightly harder. I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to truly get a picture of exactly what someone's eating, because they're all the studies are done retrospectively. But 40% is a huge increase. So, and that Mediterranean diet definitely has benefits, and we know it has benefits for so many other areas of life as well. Another study looked at a fertility diet, and they said more monounsaturated fats rather than trans fats, more vegetables rather than animal sources of protein, low glycemic carbohydrates. So that's your things like sweet potatoes, high fat dairy. And then they also included a multivitamin and iron from plants and supplements. So, and that decreased their risk of ovulatory fertility disorders. So that's things like polycystic ovarian syndrome. So there is some evidence out there, but to pinpoint exactly what a person should be eating is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, the message has to be eat lots of fresh fruit and vegetables, minimal processed foods, and that can only be a good thing for you and your offspring.
100%, absolutely. And often when I'm having these conversations about food with women, the next thing that comes up always is exercise. I get asked about that a lot as well. So we talked about supplements, we've talked about real wholesome food. What about exercise then? So pre-conception, what I find is that women are quite worried about continuing perhaps high levels of exercise and wondering how that affects their chances of conceiving. And then also in those early stages of pregnancy, women are worried about risks to baby with continuing exercise as well. Have you got specific advice here as well?
So this is a bit of a tougher one. Physical activity is definitely important, but we would be saying perhaps don't have very excessive levels of activity. So, for instance, elite athletes often have a low body mass index and often have associated ovulatory disorders. Now, in the general population, I would say, if you are a runner and you normally run 5K 3 times a week, then actually you're going to do yourself or your baby no harm whatsoever by continuing to do that. If you decide you want to conceive and suddenly start running marathons every day, then that probably isn't so good for you. So I think it's about being sensible, isn't it? And it's about continuing to do in a level of exercise that's appropriate for you, provided it's not nothing and provided it's not excessive.
Yeah, and it is. It's tuning in, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And certainly there are guidelines, aren't there? Exercise guidelines from Public Health England for pregnancy as well. So I think that might be useful to share as well. So so we've talked a lot, haven't we, about sort of that particular stage in our identity cycle or in our life cycle, which is around conception and pregnancy and motherhood for those of us who choose to or can. What about the other 2 stages in our life cycle that we tend to identify with? So that's menarche, which is the start of periods at one end, and menopause, that's the end of periods at the other end. So what's your experience then of the influence of lifestyle at these 2 stages?
So, I mean, these are definitely parts of our life that we really shape our identity, aren't they? I mean, I can remember starting my periods. So, that is a huge part of us. So absolutely, our lifestyle can influence this. And there's been some research that's demonstrated that girls that have a higher fat intake are more likely to have accelerated menarche, so start their periods earlier. And conversely, those with the more Mediterranean style diet, which keeps cropping up, doesn't it? And higher levels of physical activity are more likely to have a later menarche. And that is important, that does matter, because there is a large body of evidence now that links early menarche to increased lifetime risk of breast cancer. And that it's possible that that's due to the prolonged exposure of the estrogens. And there's also some controversial evidence that links it to an increased risk of ovarian cancer. Now, that's not so definite. And clearly, I'm not saying that people that have an early menarche should worry about breast cancer and ovarian cancer. But actually, again, if we can help those teenagers be healthier and help them to have a better diet and help them to have appropriate levels of physical activity, then actually that's only going to help them through their lives. So that stage is definitely really important. And then again, at the stage of menopause, more and more women seem to be coming to us and saying, I don't want HRT, please don't put me on HRT. I don't know if you found that. So they're trying to manage it with their lifestyle and with diet. I think the most common and problematic symptom that I experience are vasomotor symptoms. So hot flushes, night sweats, that definitely seems to be what bothers women most. And studies have shown that those that have diets with a higher intake of vegetables and fruit, and even a vegan diet, which clearly isn't for everybody, but have less frequent and less severe vasomotor symptoms. And they also have better control of their weight, which again has been associated with the elimination of symptoms. So I think it's all linked in, isn't it? It's linked in with how we feel about ourselves, and actually that links in with the symptoms that people have during the start of their periods, pregnancy, and the end of periods.
I think menopause itself is probably a wonderful topic that we need to come back to and really explore in depth. I think it's it's very much about choice, and whether we're talking about HRT or lifestyle or anything else associated in identity and belonging. And a lot of things that I come across with women going through the menopause are very much related to emotions, concentration, memory, and again very much about identity as well. So maybe we'll have a much broader chat about that on a future episode, Alexandra, because there's a lot to talk about there. But I guess just maybe then finally, just to broaden it out a little bit. I mean, we started at the beginning talking about our identity, and of course there's so many facets that shape our identity as women, aren't there? It's our values and our beliefs, it's our experiences, society around us, and we have today, haven't we, zoned in on that sort of reproductive cycle part of it, which is a part of our identity, whatever chunk of it it fulfills. So I guess I just wanted to probe a little bit into your own thoughts about these sort of biological rhythms that we have, our very natural biological rhythms, and how you feel those rhythms and our lifestyles and our identity are intertwined and connected. What are your thoughts?
Well, as you've said, I mean, your womanhood or your reproductive lifespan is one face of your identity, and the fluctuations in hormones that come with that absolutely impact on who you are and on your lifestyle. And then the converse is true. So we, by having a healthy diet, by doing moderate levels of exercise, by getting good quality sleep, we can modify the effects that those hormones have. And so we can change what we're identifying with and how we feel about our own identity. I think it's really important to say that not all obs and gynae problems can be treated with lifestyle, but actually what we do know is that if we can get ourselves into the best possible place, be fitter and healthier, then actually treatments that we do receive, whether they're medical or surgical, have a much better chance of working. And we have a better chance of our identity not being defined by the health problem we have. And I think that that's really important, because I think often in such emotive subjects such as fertility, that almost becomes our identity when everything is focused on conceiving. And actually, if we can try to look at other lifestyle aspects and focus on other areas, as difficult as that may be, then that may help us kind of pick apart the intrinsic intertwining that occurs.
Oh, fascinating. Love that. I think you're completely spot on with that, is in terms of how our identity is shaped by our physiology, but also, vice versa. We can change our physiology by what we do through our lifestyles as well. So it's, absolutely this sort of two-way street, and that sense that we have got choice and control and options and opportunity as well. So thank you so much.
And now, here is your lifestyle first prescription. Your 3 activating actions to take you from knowing to doing.
I always love to take people from knowing to doing, from theory to practice. So what have you got today? Just 3 actions that our listeners can take today.
Okay, so number 1 has got to be take folic acid. If you're trying to conceive, if you're thinking about conceiving, if you've even got a twinkle in your eye, then take folic acid. You should be taking 400 micrograms for the general population, possibly more if you're on some sorts of medication. So just check that. And that's just so important. It prevents neural tube defects, as I've said, and it increases your chance of conceiving. So that's got to be number 1. Number 2 is just to aim for a really healthy, balanced diet, more fruit and vegetables, less processed foods, and that will stand you in good stead throughout your reproductive years. So whether that be the 13-year-old who's listening, who's thinking, I haven't started my periods yet, or whether that's the person that's starting to go through the menopause and is really bothered by the hot flushes, actually, a Mediterranean diet is going to help you through those stages. And thirdly, I think it's really important to say that for anybody thinking about conceiving or trying to conceive, we should give up smoking. Smoking is so detrimental to both your fertility, your general health and well-being, and also to the health and well-being of any offspring. And I feel very strongly that that's a message that we need to get across to people.
No, those are, very, very important points there, Alexandra. Thank you so much. I guess it's thinking about, how do you go to doing these things? How do you give up processed foods? How do you give up smoking? And I think the first thing is the realization of how important it is, and then to start putting in very, very, very simple changes that can get you to exactly where you need to go. I think if we all just did one thing and deprocessed our food choices, that on its own would make such a huge difference, wouldn't it? But it's having the commitment to really see that through. And I always say, start small and just build. Don't give everything up, and don't try and change everything in one go. Just set yourself where you need to be and take every step you need to get there.
Absolutely. Often we know what we should be doing. It's not always so easy to do it, is it?
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Alexandra. I'm sure people listening and watching may well want to get in touch with you or find out more about all the fascinating stuff that you're doing. Is there a place people can find you or get in touch with you at all?
Absolutely. So I'm on Twitter. I think it's at Alex Kermack, but we'll check that. So yes, and I'm be more than happy for people to get in touch.
Great, amazing. Thank you, Alexandra, so much for joining me today. You really have given us some amazing insights. And of course, there's even more information available in your book chapter, The Lifestyle Factors and Women's Health in a Prescription for Healthy Living. So that's the place to go to get even more information and science-backed information as well. So thank you so much, Alexandra. Really lovely to speak to you today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
And before I bring today's episode to a close, a reminder that the doors to the Lifestyle First Academy are opening this month. It is the key training platform to help you discover, notice and activate who you are, what you want and where you are going, so that you can create a happy, healthy lifestyle. And my flagship course, Start Now, Transform Your Lifestyle to Transform Your Life, launches on the 24th of January. So join now with a special discount code JAN24. Just head over to my website, to the Academy page, and become a founder member to start your journey of transformation for 2021. The links are all in the description box. It is time to live with intention. And I would, of course, love you to subscribe to this channel. The links are just below, so just subscribe and share so that you too can help spread messages of health that matter. Which now leaves me to simply wish you a happy, healthy day.
Thanks for joining us on the Lifestyle First podcast, making self-care as easy as 1, 2, 3. Don't forget to subscribe and share, and we'd love it if you'd be kind enough to leave a review. To learn more or to arrange a consultation, please visit www.dralkapatel.com. See you next time.